episode of A Decade Later. Last time I did one of these, I think, was for The Weeknd, House of Balloons, the legendary mixtape that's gone on to become such an influence on modern R&B and really propelled as one of the biggest artists of today into the spotlight, into a new world of pop artists. The variety of pop artists is crazy these days, and on the flip side of that, in the same year we had a more kind of bubbling underneath the mainstream artist starting to rise, and that is Frank Ocean. Now, Frank Ocean is one of those weird artists that is so popular, and yet you wouldn't really think they're as big as they are if you looked at their chart success, because I think there's like been 2 or 3 songs that have charted, and they've not exactly been high on the charts either. I think they just did pretty good. But Frank Ocean, man, he is a vibe. He is one of those artists that everyone loves and knows, and when they're down bad, when they're feeling pain, they go to Blonde, they go to Channel Orange. I'm going to be honest, he has become a bit of an annoying. Listening to this artist is a personality trait of mine, which I always find a bit cringe and tedious. You see it a lot with plenty of indie artists. You see it with artists like Sufjan Stevens, for example, or even more recently Phoebe Bridgers. Like, it's not a personality trait, you're just listening to the music because you like it. I don't know why people do that. Maybe it's a younger person thing, and maybe I just sound like an old man moaning about young people, and if that's the case, I apologize. But at the same time, I like to roast people, so if you're offended and upset, then, you know, it's only a bit of fun, and maybe I should roast you harder, actually. And what started the success, the popularity of Mr. Frank Ocean was the mixtape Nostalgia Ultra, which came 1 year before Channel Orange, which really was the huge success of him. But you've always got to remember artists' roots. You've always got to remember those mixtapes, because without those, artists wouldn't have got the hype through the internet, through sites like DatPiff, all of those mixtape download sites. They helped really propel artists into the mainstream, just in ways that I don't think we would have ever seen, you know, without the internet. I don't think the mixtape era could have been as big without the internet. And 10 years later, it's pretty much considered, or it's pretty much agreed upon, that this is Frank's worst release. It's not one to write home about. It's not really even one. Why does this look so creased? I think it's because I'm sat down. I promise you, it's not. I did iron this. It's not creased. I think it's because I'm sat down. Yes. You know, it's not really considered one of his best. It's in fact his worst. He's not really known for these songs or this mixtape. Since then, he's completely knocked it out of the park, and this is just a forgotten relic in the history of music, sort of thing. But in today's A Decade Later, I'm here to jump to the defense of Nostalgia Ultra, because I think it's really rather bloody good. And honestly, some days, depending on what mood I'm in, this is my favorite Frank release. I think ultimately Channel Orange is my favorite. I do think that one has the favorite value behind it. It just feels like my favorite. But some days I just play this thing, man, Nostalgia Ultra, and it really just hits. It's so simple, so straight to the point, and there's no kind of like extra tricks. There's no extra added thing that makes it spicy or anything like that. I just think every track is really nice to listen to, and that's as simple as that. One thing I've seen about this mixtape is that, oh, it's just a glorified covers mixtape, which is kind of bollocks, because there's like 3 covers on here. So if you think that, then I don't know if you've actually listened to the whole thing, or unless you actually think most of these songs are covers, then I'm afraid to say you might be listening to the wrong album or something, because there's really not that many covers on here. And one thing that's also important is that the mixtape era was always like this. Artists always used other people's beats and rapped over them, sung over them. This was how it was back in the day. Lil Wayne did it for years, and no one ever says his stuff is like glorified covers. But the covers themselves are bloody good. It starts off with the really lovely Coldplay cover, Strawberry Spring, which I'm not the biggest Coldplay fan, by the way, but I think that song is actually pretty good. It's nice, it's got a nice atmosphere to it, and I think Frank brings to the table what the original song had set out to do. It's not like he's doing anything completely new with the cover and changing it in a way that makes it his own. He's just doing a good version of it. It sounds nice, he's singing well, and the track sounds lovely. Now I'm going to get this one out of the way because this actually is one that I do kind of get why people wouldn't like, and I also don't really like it, but his approach to Electric Feels by MGMT, which closes out the mixtape, which I don't really think is a good closer. I'll get to that later, but I do think this is kind of weak. I think the whole Nature Feels that he does over it's a bit corny and just not that great of a cover, and again, didn't really need to stick this at the end. But in between all of these tracks, because you know I'm talking about Strawberry String Inches at the start, Nature Feels at the end, there's a lot to like. There's a lot of likability to this album. Tracks like We All Try are pretty nice. Again, maybe lyrically not the best. I know he's gotten more intricate or more detailed with his feelings later on albums like Blonde, which I can totally understand why people would be drawn to tracks on that album. I mean, certainly tracks like Self-Control are unmatched when it comes to writing about his feelings. But We All Try, as simple and as basic as it is, I think it's pretty nice. I think it's a nice track. He speaks on his beliefs, even touches on a bit of a conspiracy thing with the whole flag on the moon, which is a bit of a weird line to throw in there, but it's not totally, you know, it's not totally terrible or anything like that. But I do like the first verse more, where he's talking about like marriage and equality and love. You know, love is between love and love. There isn't a rule between that. It is just love and love. Songs for Women, where he's sounding a bit like a player on this one. Really like his delivery on this. The beat is great too. Again, to say that it is 10 years old, I think tracks like this are actually sounding as new and as fresh as they probably were back in 2011. Kind of throws a sort of diss at Drake, because he's talking about how, you know, these girls are playing Drake in his car when they're not playing his songs. You know, it's very much like the I am it, I'm the shit R&B track that you'd expect. It's confident, it's charismatic, it's a bit sassy as well, I guess you could say. Another track that's really catchy though, just a really nice summer day, breezy R&B track that has a great chorus and just great performances all around, really, in the vocals. Like, it's a really good track. I will say Love Crimes definitely gets a bit repetitive with the murder, 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 she wrote. And Love Crimes, like, it's okay, this one. I could see why someone wouldn't like this one that much. I think it's fine. It's interesting at the end with the spoken word piece from the kind of yappy, shouty female in the track, where she's talking about how for men it's easier, but for women it's always about security and all that kind of stuff. But you know, men can stick their thing in whatever they want, which is basically what she says. It's an interesting little bit to the track, and I guess it sort of adds to the overall theme of Frank and, you know, singing about love. I do think this concept could have been tied together better, but you get the gist. Really love the edginess to Novacane. Novacane, baby. Love the beat on this one. Definitely one of his most recognizable tracks as well. There are some tracks actually on this mixtape that are still some of his most well-known and recognizable songs to date. Swim Good, for example. Love the metallic beat on this one. I think it sounds great. Definitely up there with my favorite Frank songs. One of his best pop songs as well. When we're looking at just straight up pop songs, this is up there. The chorus is fantastic. Just one of those tracks that you'd think would have been bigger than it was, because again, we've had countless amounts of R&B hits across the past 10 years, and so many of them are really, really not that good. And yeah, you've got a track like this, Swim Good, which is fantastic in my opinion, and you know, it wasn't really that big. Just so catchy and immediate with the chorus. I'm about to drive in the ocean. Oh, I love this one, man, love this one. This goes head to head with any Frank song, even 10 years later in my opinion. There Will Be Tears takes the mixtape in a very different direction, I think. Just the auto-tune on this one, and the beat sounds quite weird, like it almost feels weirdly garage inspired. Can't quite explain it really, but it is an odd, quirky beat with the mixing, with his voice, almost like something you'd hear like a James Blake song in a weird way. I do like it though. I think it's a good track. I think it blends some of the auto-tune aspects that he started doing a bit more later in his career, slightly better than what he did later in his career. I do think some of the auto-tune things that he throws in on particularly albums like Blonde don't always land for me as well as I think they do for other people. For example, like Nike's, that really like chiptune vocal effect that's slathered all over the song pretty much until like the last bit. It isn't really for me. I know a lot of people love that song. I respect that you love that song, but I'm just saying I don't know if it's really as compelling to me as it is for other people. But we've got to talk about the big moment of the album, the really grand statement that is American Wedding, which I think is a fantastic track. Again, a lot of people tend to pin this as just being a cover song because it's essentially just using Hotel California's instrumental and Frank is singing all over it. Yeah, I mean, it is literally just Hotel California. There was a bit of an issue, I think Frank had with the Eagles at the time. I'm sure they weren't exactly happy that he used the entire song, but I don't think there was like a big lawsuit or anything like that. I think it was more of just a don't do that. But as someone that's not that big of a fan of Hotel California or the Eagles in general, I think Frank completely transforms the song into something very different, and I have a huge appreciation for what he does with the lyrics here. I think this is one of his best written songs ever, and I think the commentary and the critiques that he has on, I guess, American weddings and the whole idea of marriage and how it often ends in divorce and everything like that. I think it's very poignant. I think there's a huge amount of detail that's packed in the lyrics, and yeah, this truly is one of his best written songs. I don't know if there's any other song in his discography that's quite as up there, as on point as this one. That's not to say I think marriage is bad and it's all terrible. Obviously it's not. That would be stupid to say that because there's so many people out there that successfully marry and have successful lives. But I think there's something to be said about marriage and the way it can really rip people apart, and a lot of people out there do get married and it ends in divorce, and I think Frank touches on this topic in a great way, in a way that me talking about it couldn't really capture what Frank does on this song. So yeah, I guess I get what you mean if you don't like the fact that it's basically just Hotel California, but I think if you're going to be an artist that does that kind of thing with a song, you've got to be a Frank. You've got to be a Frank and do it like this. If you're going to do it, you got to do it like Frank did, because these lyrics, man, really, really blow me away. So yeah, as I said, it does end pretty weak with Nature Feels. What I said earlier as well, I don't think Nature Feels should close out the album or the mixtape. I think American Wedding is the closing track. In fact, often I don't even listen to Nature Feels and I just end the album experience at American Wedding. It just feels like the definitive closing track for me, and really does touch on the love themes and the kind of like critiques of relationships and things like that the whole album really touches on in a way that I think just completely blows the rest of the tracks out of the water in that sense. That's what I was saying as well earlier, in that I don't think the love theme is explored in vast amounts of detail, or it's not as tied together as it could be. But I think one of the big things that could help that would be to end the mixtape on American Wedding. It wouldn't change the fact that some of the tracks aren't exactly lyrically masterpieces or anything like that, but I still think as an experience, as a front to back mixtape, I enjoy it a lot. I really do. I think all of these tracks are just so straightforward and to the point, and they know what they are. And Frank kept it simple for this one. He obviously took a direction that became legendary really for his career, because obviously Channel Orange and Blonde, and even Endless, you could look at Endless as being one of his celebrated releases at this point too, have really just propelled him to heights that I think is going to cement him as a 2010s great. I think it's pretty much locked in for Frank now. But I wanted to jump to the defense of this mixtape here because I think it gets forgotten. I think it gets a bit underrated because I think it's really good, and I'm not going to expect everyone else to think the same as me, But you know, maybe go back to it if it's been a while and you've not listened to this in a long time. I think if you went back to it, you'd enjoy it a lot because I think it's aged really nicely. I think the production is really good as well. I think his singing is great. Just all the elements that I look for in an R&B album is pretty much on this. So yeah, it's a win for me. And that's it. That's A Decade Later wrapped up there. We will call it a day with this release. Definitely want to hear what people think in the comments. What your favourite Frank album is actually. I'm sure you're probably going to say Blonde. I think you're going to say Blonde. But if it isn't, let me know. Thank you for watching. Do have a good day. Tell me what I should review next in this series of A Decade Later. Hope you enjoy this series as well. Do have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already. And goodbye.